Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to Nerd Nite to learn about self-talk and mental health. My name is Mira Simic-Yamashita. I am a psychologist and a therapist. My topic today is self-talk. So I will talk about the language we are using when we are talking to ourselves and how the words we are choosing actually affect our mental health. So at the end of the presentation, I will give you some quick therapy tips on what you can do to improve this conversation with the most important person in your life, which is, of course, you. But first, let me explain what is self-talk. What do I mean by self-talk? Our brains run thoughts all the time, so 24 hours a day, no break. And brains do that in order to process information about events that are happening to us. And it is estimated that every single day our brain produces between 50,000 and 80,000 thoughts every single day. So, and they're mainly repetitive. So what we are thinking today and talking ourselves today, probably it was similar yesterday, and it's likely to be similar tomorrow. So not all of these thoughts are related to us or are about us, but those that are, those we call self-talk. Or we call it inner speech, or we call it self-referent speech. I will call it self-talk because it's shortest. So sometimes, of course, we talk to ourselves in a positive manner. We encourage ourselves, we praise ourselves, we can talk ourselves out of trouble, of course. But the problem with self-talk is that most of it is actually negative. And there is actual research that proves that almost 70% of self-talk is negative. So these are some examples of negative self-talk, and maybe you are familiar with some of those or many of those. Negative self-talk is not always bad for us. It has its purpose, because negative self-talk can save us from embarrassment, it can sometimes save us from shame or from rejection. Sometimes we can use it as a sort of cushion in case of some potential failure. If we talk badly about ourselves to other people, if I say, oh, I never do anything right, someone will tell you, what are you talking about? You're great. And then you will avoid criticism and you will gain some compassion from another person. So we have a lot of benefits actually that we get from self-talk. The problem with self-talk, if it is negative, when we have repetitive negative thoughts over and over and over again, that is what creates severe emotional pain, and that leads to mental illness. And that's why I'm talking about this today. So I will introduce you with some forms of negative self-talk that is very common, and that is actually the most damaging to our mental health. There are other kinds, but I will introduce you to three. Okay, the worrier. These are people who worry excessively, who worry all the time. And they tend to do this, what we call what if thinking. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I ask that person out and then they reject me and I get embarrassed? What if I get panic attack in a bus or something like that? So excessive worry keep a person in a state of constant stress. And this is something that is heavily linked to anxiety and to panic disorders. Okay, then there is this one, critic. When we do something bad or when we don't do something that we were supposed to do, then we tend to talk very critically to ourselves and say some harsh words. I am stupid. I am irresponsible. I'm lazy. I can never do anything right. I'm fat. I'm ugly. Or many other things. Very, very harsh, heavy things that we would never let anyone else to tell us. But we are telling this to ourselves all the time. This type of self-talk is proven to be linked to low self-esteem, to depression and suicide. And then there is this type called victim. So these are people who use this type of self-talk. They believe that they can do nothing to improve their circumstances. They tend to use words like always, never, like I will never find love, I always make mistake, I always blow up everything, everyone can do it, only I can't, or things like that. So this type of talk is likely to lead again to depression, because this is what we call learned helplessness, and learned helplessness is proven to be a link to depression. Okay, so these are three most common types. There are other types. So these are not types of people, not types of personalities, okay? These are just types of terms that people use in their language, and you are maybe familiar with one of these, or maybe all of these, but it's likely that we all use all of these. It is just how much of them, okay? So why we are doing this? Why we are telling ourselves this kind of things? Why we worry ourselves into mental illness? Why would we do that? There are two explanations for that. We are literally, biologically, and socially wired for negativity. What that means that our brain is designed to look out for danger. And this is how our ancestors survived in the past. They lived in much more severe environments, surrounded with much more many threats than we have today. So if they were able to anticipate threat and react quickly, then they could save their life, they could find the food, and they could learn from the experience. And it was useful then. So this mechanism exists to protect us. So it is just a survival mechanism. However, we don't live those lives today, and our lives are improved and evolved greatly. However, our brains didn't evolve much since then. They're still same. And then there's this social conditioning. What this means? It means that since we are born, our parents, our teachers, and other responsible adults, they inhibit us, they control us, they teach us how to stay safe for our own safety and for the socialization. So maybe you heard some of these. Don't jump from that table, you are going to break your neck. Don't put fingers there, electricity will kill you. Don't eat with your mouth full, you will choke. Don't talk to strangers, they may kidnap you, or things like that. Okay, so maybe you heard some of these or something similar to this, but our parents do that in order to save us, to protect us. Home children don't know what is safe. But we hear this so often that we internalize it eventually, and we don't question it anymore. So it stays there behind. So those are the reasons why we tend to look for negativity everywhere. It has the purpose of our survival. However, we don't need that anymore. That is the point. Okay, when we were children, we needed it. And when we lived in caves long ago, we also needed it. But we don't need it anymore. So now that we know this, you know this is not your fault if you think negatively about yourself, if you talk to yourself badly. Now you can blame biology, you can blame your parents. It's not your fault. We all do it, but it is your responsibility to take care of it. And we can change it, that's the best thing. We can change it because our brains are very flexible. There's this thing called neuroplasticity, which is ability of our brains to learn, to change throughout our whole lives. So when we learn something new, we make new connections in our brains. And by rewiring our brain, we can just rewire it to look for positivity a little bit more than for the negativity. And that's all we need. We don't need to think pink all the time. That's not useful. You probably wouldn't survive that. And you wouldn't have any friends if you talk positively all the time. But just increase it a little bit. And that will be satisfactory. So, okay. So how we do that? How we change our self-talk? So in order to change our self-talk and our thinking in general, you will need to know some basic things about how mind works. And I will introduce you to a set of rules that are taken from rapid transformational therapy, which is the therapy that I practice. We call them rules of the mind. They're very simple and very logical. And when you know these rules, you will be able to use them in order to improve your self-talk. So this is the first one. Your mind responds only to two things. So images that you create in your head and the words that you're saying to yourself. So what this means? This means that our minds actually do not react so much on outside events. It reacts more on how we interpret those events. What kind of meaning we give to those events. And how we interpret events? By giving words to them, by adding words. So depending on which words we choose, that's how we create experience for us. Okay, so I will just illustrate this with example. For example, let's say it's Tuesday morning and you have to go to work. You prepared your presentation last night till very early morning maybe. You didn't sleep enough, you didn't drink your coffee, you have to hurry now. You're very nervous, you have to get in time, and then you get into your car and you head to work, and then this happens. Okay, you're stuck in traffic. Okay, and there are thousands of cars around you, they're not moving, or they're moving very little every 5 minutes. And now it's clear you're not making it in time. So, what are the pictures that you have in your head now? Or what are the words that you're saying to yourself? According to one American research about the road rage, this is very common. These are very common. So, this is a freaking disaster. This is a catastrophe. I'm gonna die in this car. I'm choking under pressure. My boss is going to kill me. Or something like this. Maybe it's familiar for some of you. Okay, let's imagine another person. Well, nice, I'm gonna be late for work and I have excuse. I can drink my coffee in peace. I can relax, at least I'm not stuck in that crowded bus. Okay, so we have exactly the same situation and we have two different responses. So these two people, they use completely different vocabulary to describe that same situation to them. And if you think this is too pink and too positive, I found this article. So if you're British, 50% are more likely to feel exactly like that in a traffic jam. Okay, so I didn't make it up. So depending on the words you choose, your experience is created. And if you choose words like kill, die, catastrophe, disaster, to describe your experience, what you are saying to your mind is you are in danger, and you are in catastrophic danger that is going to kill you. And your mind has a job to keep you alive on this planet. And how your mind is doing that? By kicking you with stress hormones. And now you are under stress. So this is the next rule of your mind. Every thought you think creates some physiological reactions in your body. So if you, for example, think of some food that you love to eat, you will automatically start salivating. And if you think of a person that you love, or your pet, or a child, then you will start smiling, and then you will get that soft face expression like you all have now. Okay, so that is how your body reacts on your thoughts. And how that works, there is this branch of medicine that is called psychoneuroimmunology that explains body-mind connection. And biologically speaking, what's going on in your body? When you have a thought, that thought is going to stimulate your neural cells to release certain chemicals that are called neurotransmitters. And depending on the quality of your thought, what kind of thought is it, different kind of neurotransmitters are going to be released, and that will affect your experience. So for example, if you have a happy thought, these kind of neurotransmitters, they're also called happy hormones. They're not hormones, they're neurotransmitters, but that's how they're called. Like oxytocin and serotonin, they will be released in your system, and your body will feel happy. But if you have some dreadful thought, some scary thought, some angry thought, again, different kind of chemicals are going to be released in your body. For example, adrenaline and cortisol, and they are stress hormones, and they're going to trigger stress response in your body. Okay, so depending on your thought, the quality of your thoughts, your body will respond accordingly. So our body feels exactly the way you think. Okay. So, and this is rule number 3, which is our mind will learn by repetition. So this is, I think we all know this. The more you learn, the more you repeat, the stronger it becomes. If you learn some new skill, like riding a bicycle, for example, you have to practice many, many, many times. And once you practice enough, you become confident and you can drive wherever you want. You don't even have to think about it. It becomes automatic. It becomes subconscious, which means we don't need focused attention on that. We can think whatever we want, but our body and our subconscious mind are going to bring us to our destination safely. So when we repeat a thought many times, it's exactly the same way. The more you repeat the thought, the stronger it becomes. The connection between neurons becomes stronger. And when it becomes stronger, we become able to think a thought without conscious awareness. And it becomes subconscious, and we're not so much aware of it, but it runs in behind somewhere. So these are rules of the mind. So this is how it works. So when we repeat a thought many times, it becomes so strong that it becomes automatic, it becomes a belief, and it starts working subconsciously. Okay. So what we can do with this, now that you know what is self-talk, what kind of consequences it has on you, now that you know the rules of the mind, how you can use these rules of the mind to improve your self-talk. So these are some advice. There's a lot of text, but I will try to explain. When you have an experience that is maybe annoying, but not really catastrophic and not so terrible, please stop using those words that exaggerate your experience. So try to avoid these words like disaster, catastrophe, kill, die, to explain something that just annoys you. If you miss a deadline, you probably will not die and no one will kill you and it is not a catastrophe. Avoid intense adjectives, because when we use these adjectives like terrible, disastrous, unbearable, there's a research that proves that if we use them, we feel even physical pain much stronger than when we say, I feel pain or it hurts me. So it changes your experience. So choose milder, more accurate words to describe your experience. So those milder words will trigger less stress hormones and you will have a less unpleasant experience. And start to use some positive words when you're talking to yourself. Okay, I'm not saying that you have to say, I don't know, I'm queen, I'm a rock star or something like that. Probably you will not believe in that because no, that's not me. But if you say very simple statements like I am enough, or I am lovable, or my friends love me, something like that, they're very simple and they're very powerful because they are undeniably true. So repeating those kinds of statements will trigger happy hormones in your body and you will have more happy reactions and happy experiences. And that's how you will get better balance. And if you have better balance, you will be more psychologically and mentally resilient, and then less likely to be prone to mental illness. Mind learns by repetition means you need to repeat and repeat and repeat many times. And it will stick eventually, and it will become automatic eventually. So just let it sink in. So these were rules of the mind and how you can use them to improve your self-talk. And they're very simple, and all of us can do it anytime. Sometimes, even if it's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy. We may know all of these things, but we may not always feel like doing it. Sometimes we feel we don't deserve to think positive or to say good things about ourselves. Sometimes some people struggle to say some good things about themselves. And I would give you some simple advice. This is what I do, and that I would say to my clients as well. When you have that experience that you don't allow positive thoughts to come or positive words to say to yourself, you can just find some photo of yourself when you were a child, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. and just put it on your smartphone, okay? And whenever you feel that urge to say something bad and negative to yourself, or to criticize yourself, or to worry too much, you can just look at that picture, and then you will realize the words that I'm saying to myself now are actually hurting the child. I will just, okay, this is what I have on my screensaver, on my computer. It just makes you stop saying bad things because you don't want to hurt a child, and it will remind you who you were and who you are still. So look at your picture when you were a child. Say to yourself, you are lovable, you are enough, everything you want is available to you, and repeat it many, many times, and then just let it sink in. And that's how you can improve your self-talk and your mental health. And that's all I have. Thank you.
The floor is open to questions.
You mentioned repetition creates a subconscious
Yes.
state. What other factors would contribute to one's subconscious self state?
You ask, what are other things that can influence our subconscious mind except repetition? Well, repetition is very powerful, but there are, of course, other ways. If we have very intense emotional experience, sometimes if it's really, really intense, whether it's positive or negative, then it's likely to stick around only after one time, especially negative experiences. Because negative emotions, negative experiences, they trigger much more intense physiological reactions. If you can compare now when you feel gratitude, which is very powerful positive emotion, and when you feel anger, which is very powerful negative emotions. And if you think of your reactions, then you will notice that anger is much more intense. And because of that intensity, negative experiences tend to stick easier. So positive may need more repetition and more conscious involvement, yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you should try to avoid saying like really big intense words like, oh, this is terrible, this is awful. I know personally I've got like a tendency like, oh no, this is terrible, but I try to say it like almost like a joke or like laughing kind of thing, like almost like over exaggerated to make it sound just like so ridiculous, like it's not actually terrible. But do you think that's also not really a good idea?
If the event is really terrible and really catastrophic, please use those words. Okay, please do that, because it is important for you to experience that. It's for your own safety. But if it's something that is just annoying, and we use these harsh words to describe that experience, then it's not very good. First, we don't think words are so important. It's just they're just words. But actually, they trigger our responses whether we want that or no. So if you want to have less of those negative experiences, negative feelings, then just choose some milder words, and you will see that your experience changes as well.
Thank you.
Does this answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so when you maybe change as a person because you look at how you were previously and you realize you want to be something separate from that, which is, it seems like a very powerful tool for changing. How do you separate wanting to be different than you just were without thinking, without directing negative thoughts onto your past self, which sort of spread to your current? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you are asking me if you want to change and then you experience change, how you can accept your past self that was very different than the new one. Is that correct?
Yeah, especially when, I don't know, maybe this is more common being like teenager or young 20, but sometimes you change by looking at your past self and being just, it's so embarrassing. So that feeling, which I think is very common, how do you, it helps us change, but how do you maybe not force negative feelings onto that past self? Maybe.
If you have such feelings about your past self from the childhood or adolescence, just say yourself that was age appropriate. And in many cases, it is just that. How would you react if it was your child? Just think of that. You may not be happy, but you will not react with hatred. Okay? And that will change your perception.
Thanks for the really interesting talk. A lot of what you talked about was language. So I'm sure many of the people in the audience here are multilingual, and we speak to ourselves. I know I do. Certain feelings, I always use a certain language.
Yes.
I wonder if you can comment on that.
Your question was...
Just that certain feelings you associate with a different language.
Yes.
Not in English, but in some other language. They might be negative, in my case, very positive feelings are always in a certain language. I wonder if that's something that has been studied or part of this.
Yes, yeah. So your question was whether we tend to choose different languages depending on our emotions. It's really interesting question. Yes, there are plenty of studies about that. We tend to express our negative emotions in our native language, yes. And interestingly, we like to express positive emotion in English, not depending on your mother tongue. So, that's what we should say.
One question here.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a little bit specific, but just from the title of the presentation, which is like what not to say when you talk to yourself. I have read the self-help book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself.
Yeah, there is. So
Just like a lot of the focus of that book, because it's a self-help book, was about doing like, oh, you should do like self-talk tapes and like listen to these tapes over and over. Like, as someone who actually has a PhD, unlike the author of the book, do you think that it is more important to like use positive self-talk or avoid negative self-talk just like in daily life situations, or do you think that there are actual benefits to like taking time to like sit down and like say something?
So, okay. So your question was, do I really think, do I believe in what I said? Is that your question?
More just like, do you think it's positive self-talk is useful as a mechanism to avoid negative self-talk, or do you think it's something that we should be doing every day as like a daily practice?
It's excellent question. So the question was whether we should really take time to practice positive self-talk in order to avoid negative self-talk. We cannot avoid negative self-talk. It will always be there, okay? But what we can do by practicing positive self-talk is to change a percentage. So we don't have 70 or 80% of negative self-talk and only 30% of positive, or maybe just neutral. We want to try to lift a little bit of this positive just to make a better balance. So, because we need that balance in order to be more resilient mentally and emotionally. So yes, I would say please practice. Yes, practice, repetition. Imagine just like this. So since you mentioned language, and maybe there are some language teachers here, think of acquiring positive self-talk as learning a new language. Okay. In the beginning, it's hard, it's difficult, it doesn't sound right, you make many mistakes, but with the practice, you will gain fluency. And that's what we are aiming for. So think of it as a different language, something that you never used before. If you are starting to learning Swedish, for example, in the beginning you will be lousy at it, but eventually you will become better. So with practice, you will become better, and that's what we are aiming for.
The last question.
So actually I want to combine the past two questions and go to a universal language of music and the impact of listening to positive music versus other types of genres which can pull you down, because it turns out if you're in the car, you have a choice to pick music that will keep you up or pull you down.
Absolutely.
And so this is a non-verbal type of talking to yourself, right? And so how do you coach people to pick music to pick themselves up?
Well, we need some conscious effort for that, definitely.
So you might want to tell the audience.
About the question, yes. So your question was how we make ourselves pick proper music to improve our mood instead of pulling yourself down. So sometimes people generally like to listen to sad music. And it has great benefits, so please do that. But not all the time. It is important that you find a a time in your day to practice these new skills. Just think of them as new skills and devote 10 minutes, 15 minutes per day to hear positive music and to say positive things to yourself. Just think of it as an exercise and you'll become better at it. And you will notice eventually that when that negative thought comes, you will stop and, no, that's not me, okay? And it will happen, but you have to allow it to happen. Yeah. Does this answer your question? Okay.
Okay, yeah, we're good. All right, let's give another round of applause.